Hello and welcome into this edition of the Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. And I don't think anyone is complaining this is the U.S. Open anymore, Rex. Even though Rickie Fowler tied the U.S. Open scoring record at the halfway point with a two-round total of 130, taking a one-shot lead over Wyndham Clark and two ahead of Rory McIlroy and Xander Schauffele. LACC is getting tougher by the minute with the final group on Saturday not teeing off until, this is not a misprint, 6:40 p.m. Eastern Time, 3:40 p.m. local. That is a lot of time for the wind to blow, the sun to shine, and this golf course to crisp up. Buckle up. I think this is going to be a very interesting, fascinating thrill ride over the remaining 36 holes. Rex, first, you look very cute in your suit. Some news on the anti-trust lawsuit front. What's up?
No. You were struggling with antitrust, but you got through it. Keep fighting on.
Antitrust lawsuit.
It's just lawsuit now. It's actually not. It's nothing now. I think the important part of it is, and we knew this from last Tuesday's agreement between the PGA Tour and the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. One of, at least in the short term, I would argue, one of the most important points of this agreement was that all of the litigation between the sides was going to stop. That became official this afternoon. All the parties involved filed a motion to dismiss in U.S. District Court in the Northern District of California. Now, this is important because they filed it with prejudice. And as I've pointed out in the past numerous times, this is a framework agreement, which means it can fall apart at any moment. But what the parties can't do from this point going forward is go back and try to relitigate all of those issues. Essentially, that's over with. And that includes the original antitrust lawsuit against the PGA Tour. That includes the Tour's counterclaim against PIF and Live Golf. That includes all of the discovery disputes and half a dozen U.S. district courts around the country. That includes the appeal in the Ninth Circuit of Appeals. It's all over with. And I think that's significant, and you and I were talking about this earlier, because this was the first and probably the greatest milestone that all the parties had to get over. From the Tour's perspective, it had already been wildly expensive, $50 million in legal fees the Tour had already paid. From PIF and Live Golf, the Public Investment Fund had already been put in a terrible position because the U.S. courts were claiming jurisdiction over them, and they were going to fight that tooth and nail. So I think both sides, at least in this element of the agreement, got what they wanted.
And that will wrap up the lawsuit portion.
Was that my 90 seconds of lawsuit nonsense? Thank you. I appreciate you letting me get through that smoothly. Yeah.
Back to T-Lou, who will then send it to commercial break. Rickie Fowler does have the lead here at LACC. 18 birdies. Right, he's played 36 holes, and he has made 18 birdies. I'm not sure if you've made 18 birdies in the last 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, have you ever made 18 birdies total?
Now, someone might made a snarky comment. Oh, Christy Sotero with XM Radio made a very snarky comment right along the same lines. And I'll have you know that in the last month, I've made 4 that I can think of off the top of my head. And I mean,
you must be really cooking to be able to get 4 in a month. I'm still claiming you haven't made 18
I made 2 at Scioto
2018.
during the Memorial, and then I made 1 playing here last month, whenever that was, 6 weeks ago, or however long it was ago, and then I made 1 playing with my son just last week. So, you know what? Dial that down. Yes, I've made 18 birdies in my life, probably just.
It is a U.S. Open record, though, for Rickie Fowler, doing everything great. I mean, he's second in the field in strokes gained to the green. He's second in the field in putting. 2-part question: how will he handle this weekend, and what has impressed you so far that gives you the most confidence?
I mean, all of the things that you pointed out, the 5 tools, right? He's doing everything either well or really well, and that includes his putting, which I find fascinating. The part that he has to do probably best is remember that he's Rickie Fowler, because like talking with Butch Harmon last night, the confidence was the thing that everybody was really worried about. Like Rickie felt like they could fix the swing. They could get it back to where it was before in 2014 and 2015 when he was playing his best golf. But he had hit rock bottom for so long, his confidence had bottomed out as well. And as he stands right now through 36 holes, and you and I both sat in his press conference and listened to him, it seems like he's brimming with confidence. But on a golf course like this, which we talked about is only going to get harder, that can change really, really quick. So as long as he can maintain sort of this level of swagger, I'll call it, I think he'll be fine.
It is such an incredible story. It's been an incredible reclamation project. I think a guy who a lot of fans would have left for dead just didn't have the desire to get back, and to see him reconnect with Butch Harmon late last year, more from what was a below average ball striker to now one of the best, and now take his second 36-hole lead in a major, I think is nothing short of remarkable. It's a testament to Rickie Fowler's determination to actually get back to this point. It is interesting because when you look at his history, he has plenty of experience in this position in a major championship. He has 8 top 5s in the majors. He has the most top 10, tied for the most top 10s of any player since 2010 in a major championship without a victory. And yet it's been so long, he almost has to, it's almost like he's starting from scratch, right? Like he hasn't won anywhere in 4 years. He has a rebuilt swing that is still not quite where he wants it. Obviously, it's way better than it was, but it's still far from a finished product. And he has his own demons when it comes to closing out tournaments. He's just 2 for 10 with a 54-hole lead. I know this is just the halfway point, but you're projecting ahead to the final round. Like, he has not historically been a good closer. Now you get on a golf course where you're going to have to be increasingly precise. I'm still a little bit skeptical at the halfway point of this U.S. Open, but that doesn't take away the fact that this has been an incredible achievement for Rickie Fowler and a great comeback story, to be sure.
Well, and I'm going to turn your question on you. What does he have to avoid doing? You talked about what does he have to do over the next 36 holes. What does he need to avoid?
He needs to avoid the mistakes. And by the mistakes, he has in his career, he's been prone to the big number, just like a head-scratching mistake that compounds itself, and he walks off with a double or triple, and that's how he would lose the tournament. We've seen big numbers on this. It's quite easy if you get yourself out of position to compound that mistake. You can make an 8 on 2 real quick. Yeah. DJ makes a quad on 2 and actually did well to battle back. If he continues to drive the ball in play as he has been doing for the first 36 holes, it's such an interesting U.S. Open test, Rex. Like, I'm not sure, certainly in this tournament, that I can ever recall fairways that are so wide and so it so sounds narrow. Simple, right? But they're exactly like they're so wide, and yet they're so narrow. They're 43 yards wide on average, but they're obviously playing much smaller than that. And when you get the firmness of the conditions that we're expecting, like when you and I played here, it was not uncommon if you didn't have the right spin on your tee shots to hit one of the slopes in the fairway and then kick in the Bermuda rough. And if you have that happen over the next couple rounds where you have 3, 4, 5 inch thick Bermuda rough, it's almost an automatic bogey, or you're going to have to make a 15-footer for par. It just becomes increasingly difficult. But if he can put himself in the fairway, that's certainly going to lend itself to some more opportunities, which I think segues nicely to Rory McIlroy. He's missed just 5 fairways in the first 2 rounds. I thought it was actually quite revealing in his press conference, Rex, where he said that he caught himself a couple of weeks ago watching highlights from his last major championship at Hoylake. And he noticed not any kind of physical attribute, but it was more his course management, where he said, wow, I was hitting more irons and 3-woods off the tee than I thought. He, I think, has a tendency to just wheel driver because it's such a weapon for him. It's such a huge advantage. But at this test, at major championship tests in general, where precision is really rewarded, I think he's starting to find out that he doesn't need to bash it everywhere. Put yourself in position and rely on his other strengths.
And I'm staring at the leaderboard right now, and if you pressed me, which you probably will before we're done with this podcast, between Rory and Scottie Scheffler, who is right there alongside him pretty much, I'd have a hard time picking one over the other. And I guess I would lean towards Scottie, which is fascinating because both of these players...
3 shots behind Rory. I was actually going to ask you, who do you have more confidence in, Rory or Xander, with whom he's going to be playing in the third round?
No, and I get what you're saying, and I'm not even trying to tell you that. Well, no, he's not 3 shots behind him. I think you did that wrong.
Nope. Rory's at 8 under, and Scottie's at 5 under.
No, I think Scottie's at 9 under.
He most certainly is not. Scottie Scheffler.
I'm sorry, you're right. Sorry.
Scottie Scheffler is not one shot off the lead. Rory McIlroy is playing with Xander Schauffele.
No,
they're both 8 under par.
They're both at 132. Look at the total score on the right-hand side.
This is painful. This is Schauffele. I know you don't have your glasses on, That is Rory and Xander who are playing together.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Xander. I'm sorry. That's who I was talking about. If you ask me to
Rory and
differentiate
Xander, who do you have the most confidence in over the weekend?
And I think I would have never picked Xander coming into the week, and I think you and I probably talked about Rory quite a bit earlier in the week on the podcast, just about his ball striking. I mean, he had talked about it a lot recently about, look, he just didn't have confidence in it. He didn't feel like it was going to turn around overnight, and he didn't seem like a guy who had very high expectations. On the flip side, Xander had been playing pretty well, but again, you keep waiting for him to make that breakthrough in a major championship. I'm having a really, really hard time trying to pick either one of those guys because I'd like to pick Rory. I mean, that would, to me, as far as rooting for the story, that would be the best story I'd want to write on a Sunday night, to finally get over that major hurdle that had been holding him back, to sort of shed all of those things that have been weighing on him the last few weeks as far as being the PGA Tour spokesman, and also sort of send a message that he is still one of the top players, because the way he's been playing, it's sort of hard to see the old guy. And I kind of appreciate the fact that he went back and revisited that performance at Hoylake, because it was one of his sort of signature dominant Rory performances, and it probably was the best thing he could do, to being kind of reminding himself, oh yeah, I'm Rory McIlroy. But I still don't know who I would pick between those two, because they both have flaws that I have a hard time looking past.
Yeah, that's why I think this is so much fun projecting for the rest of the weekend, because you look at the very tippy top of the leaderboard, and all of the players have flaws. I don't feel exceedingly confident in any of them.
Well, even Rickie.
Rickie's obviously still trying to find his way back. Wyndham Clark just won his first PGA Tour event last month at Wells Fargo, which was kind of a de facto major, a stout test, the best PGA Tour field. He comes in here with a lot of confidence, obviously. Rory McIlroy has not won a major in 9 years. Xander Schauffele has never done it, has actually accumulated quite a bit of scar tissue in the major championships. Harris English coming back from a hip injury a couple years ago. Dustin Johnson, I think, is the most battle-tested, having won 2 major championships, including most recently in 2020. But has he really done much of anything in 2023 to inspire much confidence? I think when you look at the question...
He won in Tulsa.
Nope, he sure didn't. When you look at the... Yes, he did. Did he?
Yes, he did. He won in Tulsa, yes.
Who could forget? As Liv is soon to be
apparently you
disbanded. Rory McIlroy, when you look at Rory and Xander, who are going to be playing together on Saturday, that's obviously the group that I'm going to be watching. I thought it was huge, Rex, for Xander to finish birdie on 17 and 18, 2 of the hardest holes at LACC, coming off a skid where he had 3 bogeys in a row. And I asked him, what was kind of the mindset or the self-talk walking off to 15th green when you get to 16? And he said, look, I'm playing way too well to throw away this tournament right now. That's all he needed to say. That's all he needed to do. Finishing with those 2 birdies, getting in the house at 8 under, getting in that penultimate group, and now having 20 hours before he tees off again on Saturday was absolutely huge. I think if you're asking who I think is going to win the golf tournament right now at 11:57 p.m. Eastern time on Friday night, I think Xander. He's one of the most complete players on the PGA Tour. He has put himself in position at this tournament for 6 consecutive years, and he's playing great right now. There's no facet of his game that is letting him down. Right now, at this point, through 36 holes, I have the most confidence in Xander.
No, I'll make a pick tomorrow night, and I want to switch gears because I am curious. Last night, our conversation centered on the idea that this golf course had gotten pushed over, that it had gotten kicked around, that it was rolling in the dirt, and they were stomping on it as they went by. And I love the idea. And
that is why, Rex, that is why you don't make grand proclamations after the first quarter.
No, I would agree. And look, again, this goes back to John Bodenhammer was on live from last night, and even more so now than I listened to him last night, his words really ring true to what the USGA has become. And it's become an organization that's less reactionary, and it's an organization that they've said all along that they didn't want to protect par, but I think all along most people thought they were lying. I feel like under this regime, it's probably true that, okay, if 10, 12, 13 under par, that's going to be fine. They didn't go outside the box. And it was funny walking over here. I saw Gil Hans, who was involved in the redesign of this golf course. And I kind of jokingly, made the joke that, hey, your golf course fought back today. And he kind of laughed, and he pointed out that he's been involved with the course setup. He's friends with Jeff Hall with the USGA, and he's out with him early every morning helping him. And he just pointed out that they didn't change anything. They had a game plan coming into this. And regardless of what happened yesterday, 262s, historically low scoring, they stayed with that game plan. And I think you saw the better part of the North Course today. And I think it only gets better as the weekend goes on. More sunshine, more wind.
Yeah, there was no panic. There was no panic. If you listen to John Bodenhammer on Live on Thursday night, he said, yes, it played a little bit easier than we were anticipating on Thursday. We do have ways to toughen it up, but we're not going to go stupid hard and trick up this golf course. We're going to let the design shine and showcase exactly what it can do. And look, there were still good scores, right? There were still good scores on Friday at LACC. Min Woo Lee came in with a 65. Roy McIlroy came home in 30 in order to put up his round of 67. But it was also punishing poorly struck shots. I mean, Rickie Fowler threw 36 holes has still made 8 bogeys. Ties for the most bogeys since Graham McDowell back in 2010. Like, bad shots are still being punished. JT, who I talked to after his round, after shooting 81, like, he's one of the best players in the world, and he shot 81. If you're not on your game, you are going to get punished. I thought there was a huge difference in the scoring average. I was out there with Rory's group. He finished at like 2 o'clock local time. At 1 o'clock is when the sun came out, and there was a stark difference in scoring at 1 o'clock and where you finished 6 or 7 tonight. I mean, we're talking 2-3 shots harder with an entire day of that before the final groups get on. Like, LAC is going to give these guys all they can handle over the weekend. I have no doubt. This has been a great U.S. Open test so far, and I think it'll be exceedingly so by Sunday evening.
And you look at, it was almost a stroke harder today. I think it came in at 72.22. I think it was 71.38 yesterday. So you get an idea of why they didn't decide to panic. I think they had a pretty good idea.
They tipped out a couple boxes. Like, the par threes were super long.
They started moving some pins on top of knobs. That probably not in a crazy fashion, but they had a plan and they stuck to it. I think that's very, very good. I do want to rewind real quick. And what motivated you? And I'm happy you did. It was very good journalism. But what motivated you to be like, JT just shot $1 million. I'm going to go get me some of that.
Rex, I know you're still new at this journalism game, but sometimes the best stories aren't at the top of the leaderboard. They're at the bottom. And having one of the best players in the world, just, let's see, 13
should write that down.
That should be the title of your championship. I mean, it was shocking to see Justin Thomas in a field of 156. We talked about it yesterday. This is a very top-heavy major championship field just because of the qualification criteria. To see him finish T152 out of 156 players was certainly shocking. Talking to him afterward, he was, I think, shocked more than anything. He said he came in here after a great week of practice at home in South Florida, fully confident. He thought LACC was a perfect fit for his game. He thought, quote, 100% that I could win this golf tournament. To shoot the rounds that he did, he called it embarrassing and humiliating, and the lowest that he has ever felt. He has a lot of work to do, certainly, before we get to Hoylake next month. He has regressed in multiple areas of his game. His putting is a little bit of a mess right now, but his ball striking is too. I have little confidence that Justin Thomas, one of the best players of the past decade, will figure it out. But right now, it is certainly a low point. How about Brooks Koepka? Rex, he's got 10 shots to make up, said that he is not a, quote, huge fan of LACC. John Rahm took out not 1, but 2 signs on his way to the scoring 10. I just wish that was on video. Sadly,
we saw it. No, we saw it. We can attest.
Scotty Scheffler did well to get back in the mix at 5 under par. Where's your head at in terms of those big 3 who are obviously the big storylines coming in here?
Brooks shocked me a little bit because I think I think he even talked about it this week, and I know he's visited a few times in the past about the idea. It's sort of the Jack Nicklaus thing. The Jack felt like when he showed up at majors that half the field, maybe 3/4 of the field, were already defeated because they either didn't like the golf course or they didn't like the conditions or whatever the case may be. And it felt like Brooks always tried to keep himself above all that. That whatever the golf course gives to me, I'm just going to go out and play it. And that makes me better than you. That makes me better than the next guy. I'm eliminating 3/4 of my competition just by having a good attitude. And to go out and say that, and this goes to what we talked about yesterday, that if it was going to be a golf course that was going to give up 62s, it probably wasn't going to be Brooks's cup of tea anyway. That's not the kind of course he wants. It's the chaos. And that really doesn't bring the chaos. But I think even we saw it. I think most of the fans saw it. The USGA clearly saw it coming. Brooks should have been able to be like, okay, this is not my course today. But by the time we get to Sunday, it's probably going to be exactly what I want. And it seems like he talked himself out of realistically contending in this tournament.
Yeah, and he kind of made the point like, well, 62. It's got blind tee shots. This doesn't feel like a U.S. Open test. Like Aaron Hills, he tied the U.S. Open scoring record, so he had no problem in a shootout there. A year later, he won at Shinnecock, where 1 over was the winning score. Like he could do it on all sorts of tests. I think he's clearly just has not been quite on his game. I was really surprised by Rahm. He at a point on Friday, he actually looked to be on the fringes of contention, like at a couple of birdies coming home. Maybe it's on 14, maybe it's on 15, the really short par 3. Like this is a guy who could, if he gets to the clubhouse at 4 or 5 under par, like Scotty Scheffler did, that would certainly factor significantly. And for him to come home in 39, back-to-back bogeys on 17 and 18, and then ram his way through 2 signs on his way to the scoring tent, certainly surprised me. As it relates to Scotty Scheffler, he's not driven the ball particularly well. He's not been quite the same dynamic ball striker that we've seen, kind of a historic ball striker that we've seen over the past couple of months, and yet he is still right there. Putter a little bit cooler on Friday, 5 shots back. I think Scotty Scheffler has to feel very good about his position. All right, we're 21 minutes deep, Rex, into this podcast. Real quick, what are you most looking forward to seeing on Saturday?
Well, first and foremost, the golf course. We addressed it. I mean, the idea that it's going to turn into
78-yard par 3, most likely on 15,
which is fun. And I think Harris English talked about that today. Like he was kind of asking about the unique nature of this golf course, and he goes, "I hit a 53-degree wedge on one par 3, and I hit a 3-wood on the other." He goes, "We don't do that on the PGA Tour, and it's something that I think he enjoys. So I want to see it get firmer and faster and more of what we expected at the beginning of the week. And I want to see how these players that we just touched on, that are all world-class players, their names, they're the type of players you want to tune in and watch, but they all have some sort of flaw that you would be like, yeah, he can win, but." And certainly Rickie Fowler, we addressed that. Rory McIlroy is in the mix. I would say Xander has stuff. Dustin Johnson, like everybody on the leaderboard is going to be fun to watch, and you can root for them, but all of them have the asterisk that you could be like, maybe not.
God, this is just such a great golf course. Like I absolutely loved it. I loved it when I played it. I love it now. We're seeing the world's best players do battle on it. There's so much diversity. You mentioned the disparity in the par 3 length, the uniqueness of the green complexes, how wide the fairways are, and yet it's so punishing if you miss them. Like I absolutely love the golf course, and I think Saturday is when it is really going to shine. The big one for me is Rory. He's slid the last 2 Sundays, both at the Memorial and Canada. If he gets himself in the mix once again here through 54 holes, he's going to have a lot of demons knocking around. You think back to the 54-hole shared lead, right, with Victor Hovland at St. Andrews, was unable to close that one. There's so much for Rory to still attain over these remaining 36 holes. And so I think that Saturday is a huge day when it's going to get firm, it's going to get crispy, it's going to get fiery, that he absolutely maintains this position. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Golf Channel Podcast with Rex and Lav. Make sure you guys check us out Saturday morning. Yes, Saturday morning. We'll be doing live from our little song and dance.
Early.
6 hours for the final group tees off. Make sure you go to golfchannel.com for all of our news, notes, features, columns, analysis, commentary, and the like. All right, we'll be back on Saturday evening after the 3rd round of the U.S. Open. We'll talk to you guys then.
Thanks for nothing, Xander.